Well, good morning. It's a Sunday morning, the first Sunday in June, which is just amazing. I don't know where April and May went, and and I'm hoping June and July don't fly by quite as quick. Quite honestly, I like. Yeah, and I don't. That's why I don't want them to go by so quick. I don't want to get to the cold stuff. Yeah, I'd rather have. Yes, I'd rather have this than anything else. Any birthdays? Any birthdays this week? None? Not so much? Okay. Something not working right, Chris? Huh. Probably turn off, shut on. That shut off, turn off. Yeah. Yeah. I can hear a little bit through that. Big, tall voice. Yeah. Big, tall voice here. That's about as close as I can get. Yeah. I'm loud, but not quite as strong. As I said, strong, not as loud. Yeah. Well, it is good to have you all here this morning. Good to be in church, and all. And we're starting a brand new quarterly in our quarterly book. So there's some extra books. If somebody comes in back there, Sam, just mention there's books right back here in the pew behind Millard, and we'll get them covered one way or another, so we can do that. But if there's no birthdays, and y'all have your books, we're ready to go. So if you would turn to page 560. 560 in your hymnal. And we may sing all 4 verses. I don't know. Last time we did this, I said, well, we'll sing 2 verses, and then we end up singing all of whatever. But if you've looked at the lesson ahead, you'll find this is kind of a matches up a little bit with that lesson here. You ready? Sing loud, Gary. Nobody. All right. 'Tis so sweet just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know, thus saith the Lord, Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Let's go to the 3rd verse. Yes, it's sweet to trust in Jesus, just from sin and self to cease, just from Jesus simply taking life and rest and joy and peace. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Last verse. I'm so glad I learned to trust thee, precious Jesus, Savior, friend, and I know that thou art with me, wilt be with me till the end. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, 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 precious Jesus. Oh, for grace to trust him more. True, 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 true. Well, Gary and Sharon and some of the others, obviously, Heimbach family and all went to a wedding yesterday. And I feel a little jilted because Gary went to a wedding without me. Yeah, yeah. I didn't get to crash the wedding. No, but yeah, I just had to. After 10 o'clock, yeah. I told him, I said, I think you'll be here, but you may be recovering, and you're probably doing both. Yeah, so it's good to have him back with us and all, and I'm sure they had a good time. I did see one picture Sharon had sent the whole gang there, so everybody looked happy. And District Superintendent Gary was over on the far side, if you're looking at the picture on the far left, and he just kind of looked kind of relieved. Either that or it caught him before he could smile. I don't know which, but could have been he was just relieved. Yeah, but no, happy for Elizabeth and Joe and oh, he did the ceremony. Okay, see, I didn't know that. Yeah, maybe that's why he was relieved too. Yeah. And did you all get your anything in the mail yet concerning Niption Camp? About camp meeting and schedule and everything? Well, we'll have to get some of those out here for you. Because Elizabeth is doing the children's ministry at Niption Camp this year, and Joe is doing the preaching for the Teens in Action at junior camp, or at camp meeting this year. So they're going to be heavily involved. And in the flyer, and I'll have to give GW a hard time, it already had Elizabeth's married name in it. And it probably went to press about a month ago. Just saying, but yeah. But I noticed that and I thought, well, good. I'm glad to have them up there and be working this coming year in Niption Camp. Speaking of, let me just say this about this. In the bulletin, it talks about the Niption camps, and I strongly, if you have a child, a grandchild, somebody that you're involved in their life, get them to these church camps because it is so very important. We send them to school 9 months out of the year. And challenge everyone on quickly. You'll hear them in the after service also. Oh man, it said Senior Sunday, and I started to get excited. Yeah, I thought we was gonna get honored here. And obviously, if you have someone that's connected, you need to see Pastor Andrew on that. Kids Zone is still going on, still going well from everything I've heard. And ladies, there is another event coming up, and that will be on Friday, the 21st of June at 7:30. I'm sure that I think there's been flyers out there on the back table there for several weeks, so make sure you plan to do that and be a part of that. You'll be glad you did. Well, no birthdays. It's hard to believe. Ma'am? 9 years? Oh, senior in what? Oh, for seniors? Well, I don't know. Yeah, this is high school here. I was kind of half jokingly, but my first glance was, wow. I really did wonder there for just a split second. But no. Well, join the club. So yeah. Okay. This quarter is really, I like it. Calling, character, conviction. on the very front page there. Lessons on leadership in our historical books of the Bible, and our first one is in 1 Samuel, and the call to lead. And I think sometimes as we go through this lesson, we'll figure it out better. We think that if we are, I'll just ask this: how many of you in here right now, sitting here, are leaders? One raised his hand. 2, 3. Yeah. There you go. That's where we're going today. You're right on. That's where we're going today. We're all leaders. Even every one of us. So, it's just in 1 Samuel. The key verse here is 1 Samuel 3:10. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. And again, for those who are watching online, and I do appreciate when we have our services online that we're able to do that, because yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for stopping me. See, I'm still a bit of a rookie, and I am a senior. No, you're right on. You're right. No, you're not. No need to be sorry. You stopped me before I made a big mistake. Prayer request. Yes. Others? Gary. Good. That's good to hear your request, Gary, for them. Absolutely. Any others? Yes. Oh, yeah. I remember that request now. Hannah. NNAH. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tammy? If you didn't hear her, Sam's dad, Samuel Lewis, and also Bill Kraft? Dylan. Okay. Oh, Millard. Okay. Kay Holbrook and her sister's grandson, 2 years old. Okay. Kim, good to see you here this morning, bright and early. Remember the last lesson I got to teach was talking about perseverance? Here comes one of them. Yeah. Actually, probably two of them. Your mom with you, Kim? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I figured there were two of them. Yeah. Well, it's good to have them there this morning. All right. Well, I'm not going to let Senior get totally off this morning. So if he would lead us in prayer, remembering these requests. Mhm. Mhm. Amen. Yes, I didn't mention Nathan, but I knew his aunt. I worked with her way back when I was in the all the evangelistic outreach was on, and during the Karen Peck singing, and this was in May. There was Linda, the one that just passed yesterday, singing in a choir, and so she had cancer, and it must have been super duper aggressive or something happened. Aunt, yeah, Linda Fritz. Yeah. Her husband, Larry, retired from out the plant 3 years ago, maybe, something like that. So, yeah, Larry and Linda. Good people. All right. Now, Darlene, we'll get into the lesson. But thank you for stopping me. I am glad you did. And the key verse still is 1 Samuel 3:10. The Lord came and stood there, calling as the other times, Samuel, Samuel. And God calls, focus is, God calls those whom he chooses for leadership. And this is an interesting lesson. I like it. I mean, it doesn't mean if I like it, it's good or bad. It just means that I like it. You know, God chooses people who are available for his use and calls them to leadership to accomplish his good will. His call is for those who will not only hear his voice, but also listen to the message he gives. Those whom God calls to lead others must first be willing to follow him. Okay. Men always get the bad rap of not listening. Ah, very good. Men always get that rap. And is there a difference between hearing and listening? Shh. I'll put you in timeout. But yes, there is a difference. We hear a lot of things, but do we listen? Do we do? And a lot of the things we hear out here in this crazy, crazy world that we live in right now, we really don't want to listen to. We may hear it, but we don't want to listen or abide or let that be part of our lives. Have you ever heard a preacher or a missionary speak of how God called them into the ministry? Have you ever looked at a person in a position of leadership and thought of that individual as being called to that vocation? We always think that the best qualification for God, we often think the best qualification for God's call is special talents. not. When we see someone who is gifted in a particular area, it is easy to think that that person should be called by God to do some great work. And if we think that, who's doing the calling at that point? Well, if we're thinking it and God hasn't done it, so we're saying we know better than God. We get ahead of God. God does equip each of us for the task he gives. But what is our responsibility in being prepared? But what is our responsibility is being prepared for God's call. God chooses leaders according to his divine wisdom. Thank God it's his divine wisdom. But what criteria do they meet to be chosen? In our story, we'll look at Samuel and how he responded to God's call. What was Samuel's character that God would choose him to be a leader of his people? In what ways can our character be shaped so that when, if you wanted to underline anything, this is a good time to underline or highlight or something. So when God calls us, we will be able to fulfill his promise, his purposes in our lives. Samuel's attitude toward God reveals to us three basic criteria we must be to successfully answer God's call. Millard, can you bump that air down a notch or two back there, please? Sorry, Darlene. Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard the story. First heard the story said in this Gary's office at Wheelersburg when he was still principal, and it was like the few days week afterwards that Pastor Gary D.S. Gary had went to church there in Cincinnati. He was a student at the University of Cincinnati. Engineering, was it? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. But God had other plans. I'm thankful for that. All right, our first concept. God calls those who make themselves available. In the world of sports, there's a lot of people with incredible abilities. They talk about basketball, football, baseball, and everything. And say, what great abilities they have. But then oftentimes, when they're talking about what great abilities they have as athletes and benefit to their team and everything, the thing that is added on there, but their greatest ability is to be available. Have all the ability in the world. I mean, you may be able to jump to the top of the backboard. You may be able to run a 4.2 40 or be able to hit a ball, 400 feet all the time or throw a 100-mile fastball. But if you're not able to be using those talents, those gifts, what good are they? What good are they? So we'll talk about Samuel for a bit this morning. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare, and there were not many visions. One night, Eli being the prophet, whose eyes were becoming weak and that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. And the lamp of God had not gone out yet, had not yet gone out. Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord calling Samuel, and Samuel was believed, from what I looked at, maybe just a very young boy, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. I mean, just a youngin', but he was there working there. Then the Lord called out, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel answered, here I am. And so he took off. I'm paraphrasing somewhat. And he ran to Eli and said, here I am. You called me. But Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. So then again, the Lord called, Samuel. And Samuel got up. You could add all kinds of adverbs here, hastily, quickly. He said, here I am. But Eli said, I did not call you. Go back and lie down. So he went and laid down. Now Samuel, so then it happened the third time, now Samuel did not know the Lord. So Samuel worked there and did not yet know the Lord. And on a third time, the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, here I am, you called me. So then Eli, the light went on. It came to, he understood then. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. And it talks about here, at a glance, Samuel would seem destined to serve God. His mother, Hannah, had prayed desperately, pleaded with God for a son, promising to dedicate him to the Lord before he was even born. So at a very young age, he was presented to Eli, the priest, and gave him over to him to be raised in the tabernacle. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. He grew up in the very center of the spiritual life of Israel. Serving in the tabernacle was an everyday routine to him. Though we don't know exactly how old he was, as I mentioned earlier, Samuel's knowledge of the law and ability to serve in the worship of God increased with every year of his life. Therefore, one could assume it would be the most natural and logical step for Samuel to become a spiritual leader of God's people. So, what do you think about Samuel? As soon as he heard it, what did he do? As soon as he heard God say, Samuel, what did he get up and do? He ran to Eli, wanting to please him, wanting to do what he could for him, wanting to serve. He was being obedient, yes. A second look reveals, though, that Samuel's experience in the tabernacle would certainly benefit his ministry. His abilities counted as nothing, except Samuel chose to conduct himself in a way that pleased God. Samuel made himself available for God's use. Now we're getting there. Let's see. It's in the first verse there. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. What does that mean? If it says that the word of the Lord was rare, I mean, we're talking in a tabernacle even. What do you think it meant? We'll find out. God was displeased. Yes, that could very well be part of it. There was nothing special about the spiritual atmosphere of Samuel's day that would inspire him to seek the Lord. In fact, it seems to have been a time of spiritual dryness. Thus the word rarity. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare, and there was not many visions. This distancing by God may have been a direct result of Eli's two sons. And it was no secret about his sons were very wicked. They abused their positions of service in the tabernacle for their own gain. Their influence during Samuel's early years could have been devastating, but Samuel obviously rejected that example. Samuel occupied his time in the tabernacle assisting Eli. Perhaps a good picture of this character is showing, even when resting, he was found to be lying down in the house where the Ark of God was. And this is where we get in as parents and grandparents and everything, and our children and grandchildren. Regardless of a mother's promise to dedicate him to God, Samuel still had the responsibility of choice. And his was a deliberate decision to be obedient as far as he knew how. Sometimes, and I know we do, and I'd seen a post somewhere on Facebook talking about real success in this world should be measured by your children and your grandchildren serving God. And I thought, wow. And so, even though, the mother had praised, Hannah had prayed and presented and begged and done everything. Guess whose choice it still was? Samuel's. Neither did it matter that Samuel lacked a personal experience with God, which I find very interesting in here. God called him when Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And that's there in verse 7. Samuel was simply available. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel. And Samuel answered, "Here I am." Samuel's choice is also ours to make today. We may not hear the big trumpet, the big booming voice, like on the Ten Commandments movie, Moses, Moses. We may not hear that ever in our lives. But God is still calling each one of us. We don't have to hear the booming voice to realize God calls us and wants us to serve him and to love him. Samuel's choice is also ours today, regardless of our abilities. Even the most talented among us is rendered useless if we are unavailable for God's use. We must choose to keep ourselves available to God by walking in the light we have, or we can choose to go our own way, effectively plugging our ears to God's call. So, maybe the first step in hearing God is not asking necessarily for forgiveness or experiencing that great salvation, but saying, "I'm listening, Lord. Lead me, guide me. I don't know what I should do, but I'm listening. I want to serve you." Any comments so far? There at the end of that concept, the second question I really want to, we'll do the first one also. What was Samuel's attitude in response to God's call? Bill already touched on it. What did Samuel do as soon as he heard the Samuel? He got up and went, didn't he? He got up and went. So now I ask the question, it's there in your book. What are some things that can keep a person unavailable to God's call? Self. What do you mean, self? People aren't like that. Are they? Are we? Yeah. Yes. Now, right. Little kids have their own strong will, don't they? Mine, me. And sometimes we don't outgrow it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's the verse? Be still and know. Yeah. There's all kinds of things that can keep us preoccupied. And I really, really, really do believe, though, that, as Kim mentioned, the keeping so busy and the keeping so everything else, I think that's part of the devil's plan. I really, really do. Because if he can keep you from taking that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, or whatever it is, and not allow you, or you not allow yourself, to think on God, to read Scripture, to listen to the music, to just have a talk with God, just have a conversation, not asking for anything, but just having a personal relationship. Absolutely. Because if we don't do these things, how available are we? Not very available. Not as available as we need to be. Mm-hmm. Cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just stop. Yeah. 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 I think one of the worst things we can do, especially if you do like devotions or Bible reading in the morning, is getting up and turning the TV on. Because number one, the first few things may just totally get on your nerves and whatever. Number two, it's a distraction, and it takes time. I mean, you can lose 10, 15 minutes in the morning in a hurry. You know, I mean, getting up and going to work, you can look up and say, "Man, I got to hurry now." And so, yeah, you want to keep away from those distractions the very first thing in the morning. Ma'am. Mm-hmm. 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 If you're able to do that in the mornings, and this just came to my brain, the frame of mind you establish then in the mornings can be the frame of the day. You know, whatever picture, whatever drawing, whatever artwork that is done that day can be within that frame that you established first thing in the morning with your devotions. Okay, so Eli told Samuel here, starting there, verse 9. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times. And I don't think, somebody, Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong. He will. This is the first time, and it said, "And the Lord came and stood there." In the other callings, the Lord wasn't standing there, I don't believe. Samuel heard the voice, but I don't think the Lord was standing there. So I think it's interesting here that here on this time, the Lord was standing there. And the Lord came and stood there, calling as the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, and this is where we need to get in our lives, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And down in the King James Version, there, verse 10, "Then Samuel answered and spake, for thy servant heareth." And, of course, the NIV has listening there. And then it goes on. "And the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle." It's the first time I ever really remember seeing the word tingle in the Bible. And it's down in the King James Version too. "At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him, that I would judge his family because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering." Wow. I bet you Samuel at that point said, man, I wish I'd have just kept on sleeping. I mean, the Lord laid something really, really heavy on him, really strong. It is very tempting when we become aware of God's call to just rush ahead into action, you know, and we do that sometimes in the church to a fault occasionally. Somebody gets saved and they say, oh, I want to do, and what we do say, yeah, go. And sometimes we need to say, whoa. You know, I mean, you go back to little kids. When they first start walking, it's such a great thing. Then after they've been walking for about a month, and they can go, you're saying, slow down. Or the things that you had baby-proofed around the house are no longer baby-proofed. You know, they're just, it's crazy how quickly. But no, want to go. What does the Lord want us to do? What does he require of us? However, God's call should be met with an attitude of listening. What is important, and I think I like this one the best out of any sentence out of this lesson. What is important is not what we should be doing, but what God is saying. That line, that sentence, I thought, wow. What? It's not important what we do, and we have doers. The world has doers. There's a lot of doers outside the church that are just doing, but they're not listening. They're not being led by God, and that can happen in the church too. We cannot let what we are doing become more important than what God is saying and than what we should be listening to. The old thing about 2 ears, 1 mouth, yeah, that's kind of here also. Any comments? How many of you are better doers and hearers than you are listeners? Yeah. It's so easy. Sometimes it's easier to do and keep busy than it is to listen and hang on. Unaware of what the Lord was speaking, Samuel arose 3 separate times to heed the call he thought was coming from Eli. 3 times. He may have been mistaken as to who was calling him, but his willingness to listen was demonstrated by the fact that he did not complain or tire of getting up to attend the elderly priest. And we do that. And again, I go back to kids so much because with the two youngins, and I remember a little bit of what ours was like when they were young. And you all will too. You get them down, you get them in bed, you get them settled, and then what starts? They start crying. They start something. So one of you has to get up, go get them calmed back down, maybe feed them a bottle, maybe, do whatever, change their diaper, whatever needs to be done, or whatever you hope will. Are you really doing what needs to be done, or just something you're hoping it'll quiet them down, pacify them? Yeah. And so then you put them back down again, and you may go a couple hours sleep, and then here we go again. You get weary of that, but Samuel didn't get weary as we do, thankfully. Go lie down, and if he calls to you, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." That may be one of the best pieces of advice Eli ever gave. There can be no truer response. The servant of God waits silently to hear the will of their master. It's interesting that God's call remained the same. The Lord came there calling out the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Only this time, Samuel's response was different. Those intentions had been noble. He had previously been too busy attempting to receive the message of God. Now he was just quietly listening. God had his full attention. And then God then revealed to Samuel the judgment he was going to pass on Eli's family. God's message was not the glorious revelation one might expect to hear when God calls. You know, this was not the Moses call. This was a different kind of seriousness. And sometimes that comes to us too. He never gives us the full picture of what is to come, and although it was clear that God was about to do a new thing for Samuel, there was no hint of his future ministry to Israel. There was only one disturbing message against the man who was surely like a father to the boy. Samuel did not protest. There was no record that he even responded to God at all. He only listened. That second question there at the end of that, what do you think is the difference between hearing God and listening to him? What's the difference? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many times do we hear a sermon? And how many times do we listen to the sermon? How many times do we hear a song? And how many times do we truly listen to a song? How many times did you say to your kids, "Didn't I tell you this? What are you doing?" Yeah. When we truly listen to God, we must accept what he is saying. Which gets to the last one, and we're just about out of time. God calls those who accept his will. If we're not willing, the call of God is not going to be manifested in our lives. I'll just kind of do an abridged part there. But there in verse 18, so Samuel told Eli wanted to know everything was said. In fact, he tells him basically, don't hold back. I want to hear. I want to know what God said to you. So, Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. Then Eli said, this is where some of Eli's wisdom came out. He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. Wow. How often do we say that? And then how often do we mean it? We probably say it more than we really, really mean it. It's so easy to say, oh yeah, well, the Lord's will. Then we think, do we really want the Lord's will? Let's listen. The Bible is filled with many examples of people that didn't listen to him. Jonah. We did that series on Jonah. And man, what a hard-headed, selfish person Jonah was. I mean, he didn't want to listen to God. He heard him, but he sure wasn't listening, and he got himself in a world of trouble. And then even after he finally listened, and he went, he was hoping that there'd be some failure. He was hoping they would turn their back on God. He was hoping that they would be judged with fire and brimstone. Accepting God's will requires trust on our part that God, being just and holy, will always do what is best, even when it comes to disciplining those he loves. We are to submit completely to his authority, knowing he will always do right by us. And that is so hard at times in life. But Eli acknowledged God's decision to replace his family with a new righteous leader. In this way, Eli proves that he had learned a lesson of submitting to God's authority. There toward the end of that particular paragraph, we can be sure we will always do what Simply because he is Lord, we can be sure God, being he here, will always do what is exactly right. We cannot know what God has in store for us, and we may never know in our lifetime the full importance of what God calls us to do. Time would prove that great things Samuel, a boy called by God, would do for Israel. And there's all kinds of good stuff there. But I think that speaks to us of our age and everything. If you get discouraged about your kids, your grandkids, your loved ones, whomever it is, don't give up. Keep on praying, keep on fighting, keep on working, keep on doing, keep on loving them. Even when they may not be very lovable, keep on, because we don't know what the seeds are going to produce. We don't know that. God knows, and God will. And the very last, and I'll wrap this up in about 2 minutes. If we desire to be ready for God's call, if you desire to be ready for God's call in your life, ask yourself the following questions, and they're there with the different little bullets there. Am I available to God in my daily walk? Do I listen to God do I listen when God has something to say? Do I truly and without reserve, this is the toughest one, do I truly and without reserve accept his entire will for my life, even though his leading may go against my feelings and I may not understand his direction? Tough questions, but we know that if we do, that God is able to take care of us, that God will keep us, God will provide for us, God will do whatever we need to have done in our lives. So just remember, don't just hear it, listen. All right, let's praise the Lord and worship.